1997 Bird Flu Outbreak. Flu strain, H5N1 bird flu avian flu number of infected, at least 18 Americans number of deaths, 6 Americans what made it so deadly. While the flu itself was quite deadly, it could not be passed from person to person, and has never mutated to spread that way. Instead, it has to be spread from birds to humans, so the only deaths that occurred were gotten from infected poultry and birds transported in from other countries. All that being said, the media covered this supposed pandemic with great scrutiny as a few cases emerged in the United States, and the panic it caused became intense. Worldwide, there have been less than 600 cases, with many fewer occurring in the United States. So remember, just because a new strain of flu is discovered, doesn't mean you need to panic. 1733 Savannah Epidemic. Flu strain, unknown number of infected, unknown number of deaths, at least 14 colonists what made it so deadly. Perhaps the earliest case of a flu epidemic in the United States was technically before we were even called the United States. In 1733, some sort of illness attacked the newly established city of Savannah, and it quickly grew to epidemic levels. It is suspected by some that this illness was actually a strain of influenza brought over by the colonists when they came to settle in North America, though that is debated. While the number of deaths may seem small, keep in mind that there were only a little over 100 colonists established at the time, and that 2 of the deaths were children. This epidemic may seem small, but at the time, it pretty much wiped out 1/10 of the settlement. 1793 Flu and Yellow Fever Epidemic. Flu strain, unknown strain, putrid fever number of infected, unknown number of deaths, at least 500 deaths from influenza, over 5,000 from yellow fever what made it so deadly. Caribbean refugees from a yellow fever epidemic were relocated to Philadelphia in the late summer of 1793. The disease spread quickly throughout the city. By October, 100 deaths from yellow fever were reported each day. The disease is spread via mosquito bites, and a cold front at the end of October caused a sharp decrease in both infections and deaths. As the fever began to die down, people thought the worst was over. Then, influenza decided to take its turn. This resulted in an additional 500 deaths. However, the flu didn't hit Philadelphia the hardest. Instead, it hit Vermont and Virginia, where people were also still sick, listed as a putrid fever, and it killed hundreds in merely 4 weeks. 1972–1973 London Flu Outbreak. Flu strain, H3N2 the London flu the England strain number of infections, unknown number of deaths, 2,000 Americans what made it so deadly. The strain experienced small changes in its genetic makeup that made it able to re-attack the population, and was then renamed the London flu. It was first detected in the United States in the Air Force, so it likely was spread through travel by military personnel to other countries. Tests also showed that the flu was influenced by temperatures, so that is probably why warmer states were hit harder. Most deaths from this outbreak were caused by complications such as pneumonia, and happened to those who were already vulnerable and who had not experienced the Hong Kong flu. The London flu strain still is in circulation today, though it has been less aggressive compared to other flu viruses. 1889–1890 Russian Flu Pandemic. Flu strain, H2N2 or influenza/H3N8 Russian flu Asiatic flu leg rip. Number of infected, unknown. Number of deaths, 10,981 Americans. What made it so deadly? We don't know as much about this particular outbreak as many before and after it, but we do know that it spread absurdly quickly. In most countries, the flu was short-lived, but quickly moved from one area to the other thanks to ships and travel. It took mere weeks for it to cross the ocean from Europe and get to the United States. Once there, it spread inwards towards the Midwest from port towns. Within only a few weeks of its first emergence in the United States, it had reached peak mortality. Given that it hit in December, this was the perfect time for many people to have the cold make the flu worse, causing pneumonia brought on by the virus to turn deadly. In January, the mortality rate for the flu was 10.96 per 1 million. 2009 Swine Flu Pandemic. Flu strain, influenza/home, non-swine flu. Number of infected, estimated 59 million Americans. Number of deaths, estimated 12,000 Americans. What made it so deadly? It spread quickly all over the globe through tourism and passenger travel. Once in a given country, such as the United States, it spread easily from person to person through breathing, coughing, and sneezing. It was also a deceptive disease initially because it was more contagious than other strains, but mimicked symptoms of much lighter and less deadly strains. The flu also targeted the most vulnerable people. On top of that, the United States was faced with a vaccine shortage, which meant that many victims died before they were able to be treated for prevention of the virus. 2018 flu season. Flu strain, H3N2. Number of infected, 102,364 Americans. So far. Number of deaths, thousands, including 53 children. What made it so deadly? While the 2018 flu season is not yet pandemic, it's still packing quite a punch. For example, 9.7% of deaths that occurred during the second week of January were listed as being related to pneumonia or influenza. This puts it above the epidemic level, and that number may still be growing. It's already become widespread, meaning it's very easy to get the flu this season, no matter what state you live in. By February 2018, the flu became as bad as the swine flu breakout in 2009 and surpassed every winter flu season since 2003. The particular strand of the flu in 2018 has caused more intense infections and longer sicknesses. The director for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention even said when asked to comment that almost everything we are looking at is bad news. In addition to the severity of this particular strand, inefficient vaccinations are also worsening the outbreak. Doctors estimate the current vaccine is only 36% effective at preventing the flu. The majority of people who have died from this year's flu tend to be the elderly or the very young. Some states are estimating their death tolls at not only over 100 people, but may even in the thousands. While a flu shot might help, its effectiveness is still estimated at just 30%. So remember to wash your hands well and see a doctor immediately if you come down with symptoms. 1947 Flu Pseudopandemic. Flu strain, unknown number of infected, unknown number of deaths, 24,000 at peak levels in 1946. There was an influenza outbreak among American troops in Japan and Korea. By 1947, the disease had spread to other military bases within the United States. The disease had mutated slightly, making it slightly different from previous influenza strains. This made it difficult to determine the cause of among sufferers. It also meant a previous vaccine created in 1943 completely failed to ward off the 1947 strain. This made the strain difficult to contain, resulting in the high number of deaths.
1977 Russian Flu Pandemic.
Flu strain, influenza/USSR/home, non-Russian flu number of infected, unknown number of deaths, 27,987 Americans. What made it so deadly? There was a very similar strain in the late 40s and early 50s that was minimized through vaccination. The strain's genetic similarity to the 1977 version led to speculation that the flu was released from a laboratory in China or Russia. Unfortunately, this flu was mostly an epidemic among children. Most adults still had immunity from the previous outbreak of the similar virus, but children had not been vaccinated against that particular strain and were quick to fall ill. While the flu itself seemed mild, it still killed nearly 200 people still in their teens or younger. As to where this flu came from, we may never know for certain.
1968 Hong Kong Flu Pandemic.
Flu strain, subtype H3N2 Hong Kong flu number of infected, 6 million Americans by mortality rate number of deaths, 33,800 Americans. What made it so deadly? Although this strain was indeed deadly, it was more widespread and infectious than it was fatal. The flu strain evolved from the widespread 1957 strain of avian flu, H2N2, and this meant that anyone who had gotten the 1957 virus had better immune protection against this specific strain. That meant that they were less likely to die from it. However, the Hong Kong flu was also exceptionally contagious. It only took a few months for the virus to spread across the globe into nearly every continent. A vaccine was not developed until the flu was past its peak in many countries. It also occurred in two waves, with the second being more deadly than the first. Luckily, in the United States, the mortality rate was less than 0.5%. While many developed the flu, far fewer died than in previous pandemics.
2014-2015 flu season.
Flu strain, influenza/H3N2 number of infected, 34 million number of deaths, 55,000 including 148 children. What made it so deadly? It is not fully known how many people died of the flu during this particularly bad flu season, though the percentage of deaths that listed the flu or pneumonia was around 9% in the first week of January, above epidemic levels. It is known that the flu was very hard on children that year. The H3N2 flu had not been the most prevalent flu since around 2012. The flu had also mutated slightly, so that the vaccine we already had for that flu strain was no longer as effective. In fact, the vaccine effectiveness was estimated after the fact at a mere 19%. This meant that the number of people who fell sick, even besides children, was higher than in an average season.
1957 Asian Flu Pandemic.
1957 Asian Flu Pandemic.
1918 Spanish Flu Pandemic.
1918 Spanish Flu Pandemic.
Hey guys, thank you so much for the support and likes and comments down below, and also thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to see you in the next video. Then take care, bye.